Hello and welcome. I am the Restless Gazer.
I am Paulie B.
I'm Johnny B.
And I am Discourse.
But together we are
I think we nailed it. I think we nailed it.
Oh,
Nailed it.
yeah.
All right. Catch up with the chat to begin with. To start with, Crypto Kev, who is, an occasional viewer over here, I think, but he's mainly one of your guys, I think, isn't he? Crypto Kev? Is he your moderator or something?
Oh, he's a viewer. He's a viewer.
Just a viewer, right?
Yeah.
I always see him very chatty on your channels. Yeah, has generously gifted 10 memberships, so feel free to go and claim some of those guys. And he's not even allowed to stay. So awesome. Thank you very much. Subs is here. Rich John is here. Team Clueless Games is here. Axe and Axe. Oh, reruns always feature Discourse. There you go. You're such a popular person. Rosie is here. Bored with disco shtick. Constant drama pots about GW scandal. Oh, right. Okay. Yes, GW is expensive. Right. And who else have we got? We got Michael Wayne. We've got Rich John. And okay. I thought you said you had to go, Crypto Kev. Never mind. Anyway, here we are. That's who's here already.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's been a hot minute, hasn't it? It's been like a hot minute.
It has. I don't want to abuse our friendship, you see. I don't want to ask you to come on like every second show or something.
Wow. I'm sitting by my email being like, come on, when's the next big show? When's it happening? When's it happening?
Yeah.
I love the show. It's awesome because you guys sort of occupy, if you don't mind me saying, you occupy a side of the kind of the wargaming sphere that I don't get to regularly engage with. Because you guys, you're the historicals wargame experts, right? You guys represent the historical side of things. You've got all the. I mean, look, guys, I'm really trying to avoid the term graybeards here, so just cut me some slack. And I don't.
Paul doesn't have a beard.
I feel like historicals have become kind of an increasingly marginalized part of the war game hobby, right? Like 10 years ago, nobody could. It was Warhammer and historicals. Those were your two options. But these days, it's like you got Star Wars Shatterpoint, you got Frostgrave, you've got all sorts of options out there. Carnivale, all these different kind of sci-fi and fantasy games. And in a lot of sense, I actually think that that's probably the biggest amount of competition that historicals face rather than like Warhammer, right? Like I feel like there's a lot more people these days going towards those third parties.
Right.
Holy crap. And we haven't even had you introduce yourself yet, Discourse. And already we have covered much ground.
Yeah, well,
Kaiser, are you doing any modeling whilst we chat shop?
Well, the plan was to build some Adeptus Titanicus Reavers,
And then-
Warhounds, and I can't find my clippers. I can't find my
Sweet.
side cutters.
Good start.
So I will be very slowly cutting them off the blade, off the thing. with the
Guys,
blade.
you left them here, man.
Filing them off.
Look, I
You
tell
got
you,
any
if
modeling-
you're trying to clean my house, okay, you can't be leaving your gubbins everywhere, right? It's not allowed.
What's really
got
annoying
any-
is I took every pair except one into school the other day because we got sent a box of GW Stormcast, the single model on the sprue job for the kids to build as part of the club. They're a pretty evil company in a lot of ways, but they do support school and scout clubs.
They didn't give me my free box of models this year.
Did you reply to the email, Paul?
I did.
Oh no!
Uh-oh. Games Workshop in shock school scandal. There we go.
Yeah.
Discourse, let's do the thumb. Can we do the thumbnail pose for that video?
Yeah.
There we go.
That's it. Yeah.
All right. Discourse, tell them who you are.
Hey, I'm
Just in case they don't know.
Discourse. I'm Discourse. I have a wargaming focus channel where I talk about all things wargaming, talk about the business side of things, also talk about the games that I'm into and stuff, and the games that I'm not so much into, as well as I've got a role-playing game channel as well where I talk about Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games. And I follow the news and the drama and the business side of things on that side of the pond as well. And I have a damn good time doing it. There we go. There's the 5-minute pitch. 5-second, 30-second pitch. There we go.
Good. Well done.
Recent videos because I got really excited because I saw you were dressed up again. I thought, oh, the skits are coming back, and then I realized it was a shameless bit of shilling. It was a commercial skit. You dressed up for a commercial.
Which one? Which skit was it? What?
I can't remember. It was a week or so ago.
Was I a German scientist or a lawyer?
I think it was one of your corporate characters.
Yes.
But I was like, because the skit, you used to do a lot more of that.
I did do a lot of skits. I used to get a lot of the skits. The skits were alienating, I think, to some people.
Oh, really?
And they used to. I enjoyed the skits. I quite like the skits, but I found that I was kind of retreading the same ground because I'll be honest, the kind of decisions that I would parody in those skits were kind of cyclical. They're sort of things that consistently happen over and over again. There's only so many times you can say, "Boy, this price rise sure is outrageous," right? Before it starts to get a little bit, it sort of starts to wear on people. But I still find opportunities, Kaiser. There's still skits that happen. All right, like I still do skits occasionally. I do them more so on the D&D side these days. I've got a couple of characters over there that I do, like the Bob Mammon, my favorite. The Hasbro executive masterclass
gross.
expert.
They're really disgusting, aren't they? Those Hasbro executives.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Just laid off over I think it's over 1,000 employees there for Christmas.
You don't have a gelatinous cube costume then?
What was that, sorry?
Do you have a gelatinous cube costume?
I do. I don't, Kaiser. Why?
Iconic D&D monster. You need one.
The
right?
gelatinous cube. I don't know. Like, isn't it just slime? Isn't it just the slime?
But that is the Hasbro executive. Why haven't you got one? If you're doing Hasbro executive, you're not gelatinous cube. That eats
I have devil
everything.
horns. That's my. I don't. There's always room. There's always room for more. We'll see what Hasbro have cooked up for us in the new year. Maybe there'll be something else. Huh?
So, should we begin there then? We'll talk a little bit about D&D because one of the things that one of the things I like about your channel is rather than like reading news, there are far too many pieces of news that I might be interested that I'm never going to read it all, and I've certainly never followed any of the kind of D&D news. And I'm talking about like commercial, corporate type news, what's going on in that industry. So I found that quite interesting. How's that going? Is there seems to be an appetite. I didn't even realize there'd been a D&D scandal over their open gaming license or anything. And they're not managing their community very well, are they?
No, they're not. That's definitely a way to put forward. So basically, I think one of the issues is there's been a lot of scandals with Dungeons. This year has basically been like Scandal City. It's like every other week there seems to be they're doing something, right? Like, for example, this week I was going to do a video. I wanted to talk about new editions of D&D and how fun, but they just laid off like a lot of people and give themselves bonuses. So now I got to talk about that, which I mean, I don't want this to be the news, but it is the news. There's a lot of stuff going on with Dungeons and Dragons at the minute. I think it's quite a tumultuous time for the franchise, right? Because Hasbro are trying to make it into something more than it is, which is a game, but they're trying to turn it into a big sellable IP that they can kind of monetize hyper aggressively. There's a lot of stuff.
That Stranger Things money.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think they haven't quite realized that the reason for the success of Dungeons and Dragons is down to things like Critical Role and and Stranger Things and these other forms of media, and COVID, right, has had a massive impact on a lot of these hobby industries, whereas they're all like, hey, nice, there's obviously this huge demand, this huge appetite for like the Dungeons and Dragons legacy IPs, and they're trying to push it in all sorts of different new directions, and that's not necessarily bad, right? Like innovation, I think, for a game isn't necessarily bad, but they're trying to turn it into like a virtual game. They're creating their virtual tabletop. They're building their new kind of edition of Dungeons and Dragons around that. They tried to, at the beginning of this year, they tried to restrict the open gaming license so that they could have control over it. And I suspect that they're probably going to continue that project, the project that everyone hated, but only do it in the new version of D&D, right? It's like, so only going forward, they're going to do that, I suspect. But we'll have to see how it comes out. There's a lot of stuff going on with Dungeons and Dragons at the minute. And Dungeons and Dragons is, if you're just somebody who's here for the wargaming, Dungeons and Dragons is the Warhammer of role-playing games. It is the big, massive company that everyone first thinks of when they think of, role-playing games. They think Dungeons and Dragons, and lots of people, play that game. So it has a huge impact on the market.
I mean, for those of you that don't know and who are into Warhammer and fantasy wargaming in general, there would be no Warhammer without Dungeons and Dragons, because that is the seed of it all. It is the absolute seed of it all. The only reason Warhammer exists is because they made too many models for Dungeons and Dragons, and they were like, we need to keep selling these. Let's make a game where there's units of them.
Of course, there would be no Dungeons and Dragons if it wasn't for wargaming, because it was wargaming that came first.
Gary Gygax is playing chainmail,
Yeah, he was playing chainmail.
So for anybody that maybe hasn't played D&D for a very long time, it's just to bring people kind of where it is at the moment. You might be aware that they had a disaster with 4th edition where they tried to make it play out like an MMO. Characters did actions on cards, and it kind of died for a while, and Pathfinder became the thing. They took the previous version of D&D. But if you remember D&D as playing a level 1 wizard with 1 spell a day, the newer 5th edition of D&D, the characters are significantly more powerful, vastly expanded the range of actions. And it's about to get a new edition, Discourse. Do you know there's been some leaks on the time frame of that, right?
Yes. So there's a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons, which is being called Dungeons and Dragons 2024, I think is the working name. So it's not really, they're trying to pretend that it's not a new edition, but it is a new edition. It's like a new player's handbook, a new monster manual, new Dungeons Master's Guide. And so they accidentally published the potential release date of the new player's handbook, at least, which was for the end of May. However, that might be the date, right? Like, so they accidentally published it, and then they said, the big picture with player's handbook, May 31st, 2024. But then they took that picture down and replaced it with a coming soon. So whether or not that is or is not the correct date remains to be seen, but it looks like it might be. It could just be internal
like the date they were working to at some point, right? But whether that was the most recent iteration of the poster they would be using.
Exactly. So it's all speculation at the minute. Honestly, it's a bit sooner than I thought. I thought they were going to push it off for later on in the year,
Yeah.
And the first image they replaced it with was a severed head of an intern.
Because they were talking last year about the fact that they were going to issue a new Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
But presumably that's all going to be folded into this.
Well, I think they're going to be staggering the release. So we're probably going to see a player's handbook first, and then either the monster manual like a couple of months later, and then the Dungeon Master's Guide, or vice versa, the monster manual, then the Dungeon Master's Guide, which was 5th edition was released, which was all the way back in like 2014. That also was staggered. It actually, they didn't all come out at once. They came out like through the year, a couple of months between each other. So I suspect they're probably going to do the same thing with 6th edition, 1D&D 5.5 2024 version.
I think you've maybe missed something here, which is your favorite method of releasing things. Something you talk about an awful lot, and I know it's your favorite. The fact that they put 2024 on the player's handbook seems to me, I reckon, just a sort of shot in the dark here, that you're going to get your favorite model of releasing, which is seasons.
No, I don't think so. So I do detest seasons. So Warhammer is actually very unique in the in the hobby market, right? In the sense that in Dungeons and Dragons, Hasbro are terrified of releasing a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons because they know it is an opportunity for them to lose customers. Because there's going to be a lot of people right now who play 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons who might not move over to the new edition, to 6th edition. And this has happened throughout the history and the lifespan of Dungeons and Dragons. Getting people to go from 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons to 4th edition was a disaster because the editions were so different. Moving from 4th to 5th was a lot more successful, but I think they're concerned that they'll lose people. That's why they're trying to not call this new edition a new edition. They're trying to pretend like it's not, like it's just a supplemental book that you could just optionally purchase, but you're really going to want to buy it. That way it doesn't, they don't lose anybody going, I'm just going to stick with 5th edition. They don't want people to say that. They want people to jump onto the new edition. Warhammer is super unique. Games Workshop actively care so little about retaining their customer base that they just regularly, every 3 years, produce a new edition because it makes them more money. They know basically that people are going to buy into the new edition. And that's very unique in the market. Not a lot of other people like take that risk on. But for Games Workshops, it's not a risk. It's just their business model because they don't have an established player base, or their established player base are really small. They're not worried about alienating them because the only type of people who regularly play Warhammer and retain themselves in the community have proven that they're very price resilient. And by that I mean they're willing to pay a lot of money for some cheap plastic. So they're gonna pay. In other words, Games Workshop thinks that Warhammer players are suckers.
John, she's talking about us.
I'm talking about myself. I play a lot of Warhammer as well.
No, you don't understand. Discourse, you don't understand. There's boxes of little pin badges that you could only buy on one day of the year when the moon was just bright, and little dice things that you could only get when the milky yak of. I mean, basically, we are whales. Me and John are those whales.
No, you're talking about yourself. I've been enlightened. I have seen the light. I've got World War II, I've got Ancients, I've got everything under the sun. I've not played 40k since 8th edition.
What?
There you go. You've made the transition. Excellent. No, but look, I don't think that they're suckers. I don't think that is. I think there's lots of people who really love the IP of Warhammer and who want to play Warhammer, and they kind of put up with the pricing because they really love the universe and they love the miniatures and they love the hobby. They love the wargaming hobby. The issue is that I think Games Workshop take advantage of that. I don't blame so-called whales or power users or whatever you want to call them. But I think that this is Games Workshop. Games Workshop have created their business model around the idea that people will spend far too much money for miniatures, and they'll spend a lot. They'll buy a lot of those miniatures, and it'll be a small proportion of people. And that keeps so many people out. It keeps people who are poorer. It keeps people who are more marginalized. It keeps so many different people out of the wargaming hobby, because ultimately, the reason why I care so strongly about this, if Warhammer was just one game of many, I'd be fine. I don't talk a lot about Shatterpoint because Shatterpoint is an extremely expensive Star Wars game, but how many people are getting into wargaming through Shatterpoint? Not a lot, right? But Warhammer is it's the stall entrance of wargaming. It's what most people see, and it is the first exposure that people get, and it cements what people's interpretations of what wargaming is in their mind. Everyone thinks wargaming is expensive. No, it's not. You can buy 30 guys for 30 quid from Warlord Games. You can go out and buy 30 miniatures for 30 pounds. I bought my entire German army for less than £100. That's done. I'm finished. I have an army for less than £100 for bolt action. But if you said that to people, you can have a Warhammer army for less than £100, they go, that's crazy. It's not. It's really, really not. So this really frustrates me.
2 Flames of War armies for 50 quid in a starter set. They're not fully fledged armies, but they're close.
It's not inevitable that Warhammer is expensive. It's a choice. It's an active business model. See, you guys, you get me talking about Warhammer again. Here we go. Kaiser does this on purpose, though. He brings me on here. It's next week show. He's look at I've brought in, and he reveals the curtain, and out I go going, Games Workshop's too expensive.
Unveils the dragon.
Yeah.
It actually plays into the title of this the live show. Same we're talking about Imperialis, Allegiance, Imperial Imperial Islands and stuff. Talking about them, the way that they sort of interact with their customers and stuff. So I am a long time GW fan. Have been since the age of 12, and I think in the recent years, the way that they've marketed things to people, especially people who are maybe a little bit neurospicy and like to collect things completely and have certain things a certain way. I think it makes it very difficult to sort of like be in a healthy relationship with that company. So Epic, let's call it Epic, the new version of Epic, when that was announced, I was like very excited about that game. I really want to play, really excited about it. And I told myself, don't get too excited, because one, you don't really need it. Number one, you don't need it. You've got other stuff to do. Two, when it comes out, you probably won't be able to buy it. And you can't. And the number two thing is what happened. But previous to this Epic thing, not being able to actually purchase the game easily, I would have been devastated. I would have been emotionally crippled by that, by not being able to buy the thing. I can't remember what game it was. The last game I really wanted to, but it was a game that came out a little while ago, and I was desperate for it. Couldn't get it. Couldn't buy it.
Cursed City.
No, it wasn't Cursed City. It was one of them though. I couldn't get it. It was
that sold out quickly, and
it was just stressful. It was stressful. Saturday morning shouldn't be stressful. You should be like, I'm going to buy some toys. Yeah. You know. Horrible.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let's talk about this one first. Adeptus Titanicus.
Brilliant game.
So the current version, Discourse. Have you played it?
No.
Have you seen it?
No.
Seen it being played? You got no thoughts on it. No interest.
I don't think about it. No.
You don't think about it. Look at that beautiful thing that John is showing you there.
Mine are in the loft.
Yeah, it looks neat enough. That's not the scale I'm interested in. I like the 28 millimeter, 32 millimeter. That's the scale of miniatures I'm into. So, sorry, Johnny, but it's just not big enough for me.
I know. Story of my life. Story of my life.
Okay. Paul, have you played it? Did you get it? The new one?
So I bought it, I think was it 2018, 2019? I went to Games Day. I saw it. I said to my wife, I need this in my life. Something's calling to me. It's calling to me. I like BattleTech.
She was thinking, is there space in the loft?
So I bought it. I ran home. I opened it up. I clipped it off the sprue. I stuck it all together, magnetized the weapons. Was like, this is amazing. Airbrushed all the carapace, put some of the detail on, got tired, looked over my shoulder, saw a goblin, put the Titan down and painted goblins. That's as far as I got. So I've not played it, but I have looked at it and it looks like a really complicated version of BattleTech.
Well, John, you have played it now.
I have played the newest version, and I'm guessing it's very similar to the old version.
No, it's not. Not at all.
No. Okay, right. Well, I can ignore that.
That isn't.
Adeptus Titanicus it's going to take me more than one go to get it. That's for sure. But ultimately, it's just trying to figure out what happens when, because the phases sort of merge and overlap into each other. So but it's okay. It's fun. It's Titans.
Is this the old? Is this the old one? This is the old
current
one.
The current one.
Okay.
Have a little go on the Thursday. Just being, I mean, I can't really comment. I've had a glimpse at it, and it looks like it could be fun because it's just Titans. But like, imagine you're smaller and they're massive. It's awesome. What's your take on it, Kaiser? I mean, you've had a couple of goes now. What is it?
Yeah,
all right?
I played a couple of games. So we went down Luton Club last Thursday, and John played Callum, and I took him through the rules. I've played the game once before, just once with James. It's a game that looks very complicated. It actually isn't that bad.
Yes.
But nothing about it is familiar, is the problem. You know, there's no with a lot of GW games, you recognize this is 90% like Warhammer and 10% new or whatever. Like, you know, Gorka Morka, even Necromunda, strength and wounds and toughness. This is all familiar, right? Although you roll different colored dice or whatever. In the Adeptus Titanicus, none of that is the case, and there's some bizarre choices. You roll d6s for everything except you make command rolls on a d10, and that I don't know why. And it feels like there was more to do with d10s in earlier iterations of the game, and they gradually phased all of that out, and they were just left with this last bit, and they didn't realize how weird it is to just have one bit like that. But I really enjoyed it. It's done a good job of making a game where you've got 3 or 4 models actually quite interesting. And it is about phases and choices that you make in them. So you can move, repair, and shoot in every turn, but in the order system allows you to sacrifice some of those elements to do more of the other.
Okay.
So if you go full tilt, you move normally in the movement phase, and then you move again in a straight line afterwards, for example, right? And when you move, you can move in a 45-degree arc freely, but turning is a problem because they're giant machines. So the lighter mechs can get round the back of the bigger mechs. So facing and things like that matters. It's still got that kind of skirmishy. You draw a line of sight from the weapon, so you get down and you peer from the gun port.
Hell yeah!
See where it is. And that's a little bit of an old school touch, but when you're doing it with 3 models that are 4 inches tall, it's not so bad.
True line of sight is awesome. It's the best. It's the best line of sight. Fight me.
I like it quite a lot, actually. I hate the model kits, and they've got that problem. Paul was saying before the show. With it, they are multi-part monopose models.
Oh, some of it's crazy. Some of it is
could have been built in 20 parts, and they're not. They're built in 80 parts for a Reaver.
You're gluing on like
50 for a Warlord.
You're gluing on like balustrades, which are like 3 mil tall.
Yeah,
in like 9 parts around top of the thing, and it's like, if you're post 40 and your hands look like this, that ain't happening.
Yeah. But the smaller the Titans, so the Warhounds are not too bad, and the Knights are all right. They're a bit more complicated than a Space Marine, but not much. But I did actually enjoy it as a game, which is handy because what I did want to talk about was
I hate you.
Legions Imperialis.
I hate you. I hope you paid through the nose for it.
No, I ordered it from Whaling Games, £96. Bought 2 of them, of course, which is why you couldn't get one, Paul.
Yeah, he bought
I got 2, so you didn't get any.
These bloody scalpers. These bloody scalpers.
Kaiser. Yeah. It's Christmas soon, and I've got commission slots free.
You got open commission slots.
Boxes of plastic.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Definitely. Plastic for painting is something I'm very into because it turns out being a lot cheaper than actually paying a commercial rate. Right. So Legions Imperialis then. I haven't played it yet. I have watched the video. Discourse. Tell us your feelings and your views about Legions Imperialis then. You said it's not your game. Too small scale.
Yeah, like I haven't really thought about it that much, to be honest. I read one article like back when they were first sort of teasing it, and I saw that you created your orders in secret and then you assigned them to all your models, and then you both revealed all the orders at the same time. And like I was like, okay, well, never mind then. Like I don't know. It's got so many things that I just don't care about. It has mechs. I don't care about mechs. It's set in the horse. It's set in the Horse Heresy. I don't care about the Horse Heresy. I don't like Space Marines. So like, I mean, come on. Okay. I also hot take. I think the Horse Heresy actually ruined Warhammer 40k. I think it actually destroyed the setting, but it took everything interesting about it and turned it into this melodramatic Space Marine like Power Rangers bullshit. But aside from that, though, I'm just not like I just don't really. I never played it when I was younger, right? I have like no nostalgia for it whatsoever, and it really feels like a nostalgia release to me. You know, like I'm excited. I'm excited for the old world, but that's because I played Warhammer Fantasy when I was younger, and I'm just a little bit of a sucker for that sort of stuff, you know. Whereas Epic, I don't have that kind of personal connection, so I just don't. I wasn't really anticipating it that much. I'm happy to hear that they've made you know, like a little bit of a different game. I think it sounds a little bit different from the typical Warhammer game. I think that's good. It's very rare.
Very familiar to the. It is essentially the original Epic, not the Epic Armageddon, which changed it a lot.
No,
actually,
Space. Is it more like Space Marine Kaiser?
Yeah,
like the original
yeah.
Space
So
Marine?
You've got a hit roll and a save roll.
It's fantastic. It's just so simple.
It's Warhammer without all the bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, in saying that, I think in original Space Marine, or Epic, whichever came first, was the one I played. It had a lot of things like in a notes box that gave like weapon special effects. Yeah. It's changed that into keywords. And I know some people that don't like keywords in war games. I do, because I find that generally exactly that keyword is the rule you are debating. And you can quickly find an alphabetized list of keywords and find the rule. Whereas in other rule systems, I mean, we had Delesio on the other week, and he's not as bad as some writers, but he often has rules and fluff in the same page. And you spend a long time looking for the bit of information that you want to clarify something. And I think keywords is the obvious solution. You know, what I really didn't like about 8th edition, in Warhammer and I liked 8th edition a lot, especially at the beginning, was its insistence on relabeling everything.
Agreed.
You didn't have Deep Strike anymore, and you didn't have Objective Secured. You had your own version of it, Defenders of Humanity or whatever it was.
You can get away with that if it's really accessible. Like if you've got like unit cards or something, I think you can get away with that then. But if you're using a book, keywords are like the obvious solution to having a lot of text and information for those models.
And where they're standardized.
Yeah, exactly. And having just a chapter of like, here's all the keywords, right? Yeah. Like it makes sense.
This is what shield draining does, right? There's some different weapons have different values of shield draining. Like this is what it does.
I get that it makes it harder to learn the game, but once you do you get to know your own list, you can just you tend to just know it all intuitively.
But I think it's harder to learn the game before you play it, but I think it's much easier to learn it while you're playing. One of the things I actually really liked about Adeptus Titanicus is it claims to have a quick start guide, and it doesn't. It's just the rules. From that point, it says quick start. But what it does is it just takes you through all the phases. So you can just play it whilst reading the book.
Is it you go, I go?
It's alternating.
Okay,
actions, because
that
it's a very small unit count.
Yeah.
With Epic, I think that's also alternating activations.
Yeah.
And there's phases, whether you've got an advance order or charge order and things like that, changes the order of operations there.
You haven't played it yet, but from what I imagine, from what I've heard in the abstract of the rules, it sounds like the action of the game is in the decision of what unit orders to prioritize, right? Like you issue out all your unit orders, your opponent issues out all their unit orders, and then you kind of reveal your orders. Both of you reveal all your secret orders, and then it goes to me, and I have to decide what model to activate and perform the action that I've already pre-assigned. And that sounds like that is the core, like tactical decision that you will be making. Is that correct?
Yes, but the orders are phases.
What?
It's not you pick a model and carry out its order. It's still got a movement phase and a shooting phase and so forth.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's not a skirmish game.
So you got like, I don't know specifically what the phases are. I've forgotten them now. It's movement, and everybody that's on march move or whatever, I move one of my units on march, and then Kaiser will move one of his.
Oh,
so the orders function like sub phases. It's like which sub phase do I want to take advantage of? Think of it in those terms. That's not exactly how it works, but that's kind of broadly how it works.
You've lost me a little bit now. I was interested for a moment, and then now.
Come on, it's good. It's good. It'll be good.
It doesn't work the way you thought it was.
Like what I was saying before the stream, I think we've entered into like a postmodern era of wargaming when it comes to Warhammer and anything Games Workshop related. The rules are just so insignificant. It's an event. It's put loads of beautiful models on a table and roll dice at each other until one of you falls over dead.
But I could do that I could just do that, and like I could just do that. You know, I could just go, okay, I'm gonna roll a d6, you roll a d6, and we'll see who wins. I mean, that's basically the Lord of the Rings game, and that's a lot of fun.
Think of the shareholders.
I get that the game. I get that the game is a spectacle, and I get that Games Workshop as a company do rely on the spectacle a lot, right? Because like their main selling point is beautiful miniatures. It's not robustly designed games, thank God, right? So like I get that is the case. It's just that I do expect games to be good, especially if you're spending like the price that they charge for the starter box, for example. I mean, like how much, £96 or so, like on a discount from Wayland Games for the box set, right? Like, and you get the minis, and the minis are fun to paint and stuff. But like the kind of social contract is at the end of all that, you're gonna have a game that you can then play with your friends. And I mean, I'll be honest, Polly. I can hang out with my friends and do anything. Like I'm up for hanging out with my friends, but if I'm there to play a game, I want to play a game. Like I want to have a fun game. And there's too much competition these days. There's too many great games now. Like it's not. I might be stepping on a few toes here, but it's not the early 2000s anymore. You know, like there's a lot of competition now. I've got so many games. I got too many games in my library to play. I mean, why should I spend time on this, right? If I don't have any nostalgia for it, why would I play this game if it's not like?
Oh, definitely. If it doesn't appeal to you, you wouldn't be doing it. I mean, the big appeal to me of Adeptus Titanicus and Legions Imperialis in particular is that I'm so out of love with Warhammer as a game system.
Right.
But I haven't lost my childhood enjoyment of its backstory and so forth, and wanting to be on some level still part of Warhammer. You know, it's still. That's something that I'd wanted to keep hold of, but I'm just tired. You know, the move from 8th through to 10th has just completely sucked all of the will to play.
Here. No, I 100% agree.
I haven't painted a Warhammer 28mm miniature in a couple of years now. You know, despite buying both the 9th and 10th edition release boxes, I sold them on eBay. Both.
Okay. Yeah,
because I just didn't. I wasn't interested enough to add any of those models to my collection because I really didn't. The problem with doing a YouTube channel is I felt the need, so we played some introductory games. So I suppose I did paint the Necrons from the 9th edition release from the recruit box. I painted 13 models. That is what I have done since.
But that was for content.
Just purely for content. I wanted to like it. And I wanted to like 10th edition, and I don't.
It's the human heart in conflict with itself, you know?
It's not great. I mean, guys, I agree. I literally experienced the same thing. Me and John, right, have been playing 40k since 2nd edition, pretty routinely. Like, I had armies, added to armies, continued to grow things and stuff. And 8th came along. We looked at each other. We looked at the, I don't know, let's just say, random figure, £4,000 worth of books that we'd purchased again and again and again, the same names on Codex Orcs, like 100,
often with the same picture on the cover.
Yeah, often the same picture. Yeah. And we said, this looks like a good 8th looks like a great version of this game. It's simple. They've got power levels. It's unit cards. Let's just stick with this. Let's promise ourselves we won't go another edition further. And we almost did. In fact, we have. In practice, because the last game we played together was 8th, 8th edition. We bought 9th. I didn't play it. I painted up the Necrons, like you said. I bought 10th. I painted up the Nids. I haven't played it. I won't. You know.
Yeah.
I think there is a thing where there is a fatigue. It's similar, actually. I think it's almost parallel to what's going on with like Disney and the Marvel movies. People are tired of superhero movies. It happened in the 70s with cowboy movies. People get bored of stuff.
Yeah.
They get bored of stuff.
But that's, I mean, like, let's be real. We're all people who've been wargaming for a really long time, right? I would say that that's pretty natural for a lot of people to get bored of Warhammer. I think that's kind of like the natural lifespan of a seasoned wargamer. Whereas I suspect that the vast majority of the audience of Warhammer today are quite young and probably got into Warhammer through COVID, like during the pandemic. And Warhammer 10th edition was really an opportunity to kind of grab that audience and pull them along, Like, I don't think that Warhammer 40k 10th edition was made for established gamers. Horus Heresy, I think, was made for established gamers. I think Epic is an attempt to retain that kind of older, I'm going to use the word again, graybeard demographic. And so too is the Old World, an attempt to continue to cash in on that nostalgia, while Warhammer 40k, I think, is being positioned as the game that is designed for younger hobbyists, for people who are newer and who are getting into it and are going to be monetized through like Primarchs and things like that.
But Discourse is actually something that you talked about a little while ago on your videos, and I can't remember what it was now. I've completely lost my thread. What I was going to say is that I think a lot of people playing Warhammer now aren't even playing. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you talked about the amount of people playing. I can't remember what video it was. But you did talk at some length about like how many people actually play Warhammer. Like how many people? Lots of people buy Warhammer. Lots of people have it on their shelves. But how many people actually actively engage in games and play? But I think probably not as many as you think.
No,
I think something that came off the back of two things really. One, the lockdowns, the COVID pandemic, and the lockdowns and stuff, and two, the way that social media and the way that GW market to people with the use of influencers and stuff like that. I think more and more and more every day that goes by, more people are doing the Warhammer hobby, by proxy. They're not doing they're watching people do the hobby. They're paying people to do the hobby for them. Or they're buying the hobby themselves and looking at the grey plastic while they watch someone paint the plastic and play with the plastic. And they're not actually even it's like parasocial wargaming. It's weird.
I think that's a really astute point. I think that Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons both have this, where it's very social media friendly, so in Dungeons and Dragons case, there's lots of like clips and things like that you can see online, and you got Critical Role, and you can see like these really cool clips of like these funny moments from Critical Role. I think that has done a lot too. And I think the exact same thing is true of Warhammer, where you've got lots of influencers who are able to like paint minis and show these painting. I know people who like just watch painting videos, but they don't paint models, but they enjoy the actual, like, come on, let's be real.
I find that really bizarre.
The vast majority of Squidmar's audience do not actually paint Warhammer or models or anything. Most people I know who watch Squidmar don't paint models. They're not designed for that, And I think you're totally right. It's parasocial wargaming, and it goes to a lot of different levels.
People watch Squidmar videos because it's a handsome bloke with a baby on a thumbnail. I mean, I think that's.
No. I think that people watch Squidmar because he makes fun content, and he is engaging, and he has evocative titles, and and people know what they're going to get when they click in, and he creates his content not for painters, he creates them for a casual audience, but that's fine, right? That's fine. It's kind of funny. I think that there's more people who read the Horus Heresy books than actually buy models, for example, right? And that's part of the reason why I think actually Horus Heresy has been a massive disaster for Warhammer, not for its profit margins, and not for like its. I guess if all you care about is Warhammer, I guess it's not that big a deal. But as someone who cares about the wargaming side and the wargaming side of Warhammer, I think it's a huge problem, because it has cemented this idea that Warhammer is distinct from any other type of war game, that if you're into Warhammer, you're not a war gamer, right? And you actually have arguments online about what a Warhammer hobbyist is, right? Like you have people saying like, well, if I read the books and then I never actually buy a model, am I a Warhammer hobbyist? And the answer is no, but you wouldn't have been a Warhammer hobbyist even if you'd bought a model, because there is no such thing as a Warhammer hobbyist. You're a Warhammer fan. You're a fan of Warhammer. This is like being like, I've watched every Marvel movie. I am a Marvel hobbyist. No, you're not. You are a Marvel fan. It's okay to be a fan of things, right? But if you build models and you paint models and you play games, war games, you're a war gamer. You're a miniature painter. That's the hobby you're engaged with. You're not engaged with the Warhammer hobby. And this is a massive problem, because Games Workshop have
Well, they're
managed
trying to
convince-
claim the language
Yeah,
there, though, haven't they?
exactly.
They talk about it's not just the Warhammer hobby; it's the
Yeah.
hobby.
And what they've done,
what they mean is Warhammer is
they have
the hobby.
centralized wargaming under a specific brand, their brand, because they want to create their own proprietary brand so that they can monetize the audience there, so that they can retain the audience there and not actually have to deal with any competition. And that's ultimately why Warhammer is expensive. So you can't just say, oh, if you don't like the price of Warhammer, don't buy it, go play another game. The problem is Warhammer is going to be this expensive because there are no other games to play. There is only Warhammer. That's it. And there are more people in, for example, like there are more people in the Warhammer subreddits than there are in the Wargaming subreddits. That's mad. That's like having more people in the Call of Duty subreddit than in the video game subreddit, right? Like it's like backwards. It's the wrong way around. And that's because from a very early stage, Warhammer managed to centralize itself as the kind of nexus from where Wargaming split off. And it, like I said, it used to be the case that you had Warhammer, you had historicals. We do have a lot more competition these days, but it's like everyone's fighting over 5% of the pie, while Warhammer just sits and absorbs all the newer hobbyists.
You know what, Discourse? What's really sad about all of that is the fact that it's not even planned. And when you watch these videos, when you watch these videos, when they're talking to the old guard who have now long gone, right, and you suddenly realise that the people that are in charge that are driving that ship now have no idea they were born. They don't know what they've got in their hands. They don't realize the cultural significance of it, actually, because I tell you for one thing right now, okay, the reason Warhammer is as popular as it is because under every bed in almost every house in the great United Kingdom, there is a box of half-built, half-painted Space Marines. Because that stuff was on the high street. People dumped their kids in there and went shopping. And it's ingrained in our society, that is, that's why that's wargaming. It's not, is it? It's
so I think it's important though to say this, because you said some pretty outrageous things there. You said that there is no competition, that there isn't anything but Warhammer, or there won't be. And I think we're on a historical channel here, and I think that we know there are several thriving companies, and that what the kind of the self-publishing and the access to
massive
independent marketing is within our subset is huge. And you need look no further than your man down at St Albans, Mr. Lardy, to see that they've got their own subculture.
Yes,
and they have their own comprehensive range of games. Some are much better than others, going back years and years. I mean, the idea, the hobby is, and I understand the direction of travel for Warhammer and what it's trying to achieve, but I think it's quite disingenuous to say that it has achieved that in terms of its cultural significance. I think you're right. But if there was going to be, I don't know, an episode, a TV drama featured wargaming, it would still have banks of Napoleonic miniatures in it. Not
would it have Warhammer?
No,
it
wouldn't.
Right.
It'd have banks of glossy, varnished Napoleonic miniatures.
Yeah,
that's still there.
That's a problem. You get like that's
museums.
A problem, right? That people don't think of Warhammer as a war game. Like that, it is a war game.
Yeah, but
right?
to say that wargaming has been like completely subsumed by Warhammer, I don't think that that's true.
Okay, so let me clarify. Let me clarify. So obviously, wargaming is bigger than it has ever been before. Wargaming is bigger. There are more games. There are more people playing war games. There's more money in wargaming. Kickstarters are massive. You never used to see that before. It is more accessible than ever before. Wargaming is in a really great place. I'm not disputing that. But what I'm saying is that the size of wargaming is like 2%, and then you've got 98% of Warhammer, right? Like my point is that it's a tiny percentage of this massive pie. I don't see Warhammer as distinct from wargaming. I see it as just like any other war game, and it's in competition with all the other war games. And I think that is a much healthier way to view it. I don't think it's distinctive from other games. Why is Warhammer its own hobby and Bolt Action isn't? Why is Warhammer
for all the
its
reasons
own hobby?
you just described?
Right, but no. That doesn't make it a new hobby. That just makes it an incredibly successful franchise. That's all it does. It doesn't mean it's a new hobby. A distinctive hobby, right? Okay.
But I think you'll see, even if you just look in the chat, there's plenty of wargamers who maybe they started with Warhammer, but they don't see Warhammer as part of their hobby.
Right. I think that's a mistake, though. Not to perceive Warhammer as part of wargaming. I think that is patently insane. Like, I think Warhammer is obviously a war game. Like, what else would you describe it as? And that's its core business, right? If you try to, the core business of Games Workshop is Warhammer, and that is a war game. Like, they will describe it as a war game to investors, but on all their marketing materials, they will describe it as part of the Warhammer hobby.
Warhammer has a war game.
Yes.
Warhammer isn't a war game. War game is a cultural phenomenon. The number of people, you've said it yourself innumerable times, the amount of playing people do compared to buying, compared to engaging with, I don't know, their Astartes video, whatever else. That's why Warhammer has had the significance that it has.
Kaiser,
is that you can read the novels and love Warhammer and never touch a model.
So if
the number of people who buy versus the number of people who play is really different.
Can I ask you a question, Kaiser?
Of course you can.
Alice. If I read the Horus Heresy series, am I engaged? What am I doing? Am I Warhammering?
I think you're probably wasting your time. Most of it's trash.
Right. But I think, but importantly, I am reading, right? Like I am reading. If I'm reading a book, I'm reading, right? Like
you get an audio book and you know it.
Yeah. Well, I'm reading, right? Like if I read the book, if I play Warhammer, I'm playing the war game. I'm engaged in wargaming. And that you can't take away that. That's an inalienable quality of the activity that I'm performing. I'm performing wargaming, right? Ultimately, when we're talking about wargaming and we're talking about Warhammer, these don't exist. They're not real, okay? We've made up these two things. We've made up this idea, this conception of wargaming, which comprises of a bunch of different activities, and we've invented Warhammer as well. I'm arguing, like this is where the action is. I'm arguing about what it is, what it means to engage in Warhammer, and what it means to engage in wargaming. Right? These are all social constructs. They don't exist, right? But I think that it is a mistake to perceive Warhammer as distinctive from wargaming because it lets Games Workshop get away with a lot of things. It lets them get away with higher prices. It means that they're not compared to their competition. Like how many people are like pulling out like, how come Games Workshop's latest model is at $25? Bolt Action just released a model there for $15. That doesn't make sense. They're both made out of hard plastic, right? No one does that. Everyone's like, oh boy, the new price. Oh no, it's gone up in price. Ain't that bad? What are we going to do about it? Right? Of course they're going to raise the price. There's no competition with Warhammer. If people got into, imagine if Games Workshop sold other games in their stores. Imagine for a moment.
Like they did.
Imagine this weird magical wonder world where most people walked into a Games Workshop store and actually there was like a variety of games they could buy. It wasn't just Warhammer, Fantasy Warhammer, but small. Sci-fi Warhammer, but small, and the Fellowship of the Ring box, and that was like your collection that you could buy from. Imagine if instead, like there were other games that existed. Imagine they could buy like Carnivale or Aliens versus Predator, or or like Mars Attacks, the game. Who could forget? Who could resist that when they walk in, right? It would be a much healthier marketplace. It'd be a much healthier marketplace.
Cultural penetration, though, is Warhammer has a cultural penetration. That's certainly true. But Star Wars Legion is not a bigger game than Warhammer, but Star Wars has a much bigger cultural significance. So one of the things I think I'm always interested to hear what you say, but the idea, I guess the point about this, like Warhammer is somehow taking people and keeping them that would otherwise go into other things. I mean, I work with kids all the time, right? And I see this, and it's like you tell them that you've got a gaming club and they want to do Warhammer. You tell them you've got a role-playing club and they want to do D&D. They're the same reason that they want Nike trainers and they want a super dry t-shirt, right? Because they're taken in by the brand and it's the marketing around it. I'm not convinced at all that anybody who is interested in branching out beyond Warhammer is somehow trapped there. I don't accept it.
I think they are. I think they are. I think they are, Kaiser.
People who are heavily motivated by brand identity stay there, but that's on them. But if they were gamers and they actually wanted to play a World War II game, they wouldn't have to look very far. You can Google anything, right? Everybody's got the internet on their phone while they're sat at the bus stop. World War II war game. Oh, look, there's thousands of them. I don't.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
understand the premise, and I think their marketing strategies are very much intended to do that. I think the nostalgia hits around their games. I'm not an idiot. I'm buying into Epic because I remember it very fondly from when I was younger, and they provide other games on their shelves in a cycle because they need you to have something to do when you're a bit fed up with Warhammer right now. I'm a bit bored of 40k or whatever. Said, oh well, look, there's another thing for you to try, and it's new. And we're going to run that for 2 years, and then we're going to can it, and we're going to do Battlefleet Gothic. 2025 Battlefleet Gothic, by the way. I'm calling it now. I'm calling it now.
I spent 15 years playing Warhammer, not knowing that there are other games. I went.
You didn't have the internet in your pocket.
Yes, I. How old do you think I am?
Not in your pocket, you didn't.
I did. I spent 15 years not knowing about other games. Or if I did know about other games, I didn't really kind of care to learn about them because I was in a Games Workshop store and I couldn't have played them anyway. Because I was the only local place to me was a Games Workshop store. So I would play Warhammer, and I played all the different Warhammers, you know? It wasn't until I started playing some alternative games that I started to realize that actually, you know what? The games can be really good. Now, like I said, wargaming has never been bigger, but Warhammer 100%, I think it's like almost indisputable that it acts as a sales funnel where a lot of people come into Warhammer and they get stuck within Warhammer, not necessarily, Kaiser, in the sense that they're like, I don't want to know about other games, and they never hear about them because they're just in this Warhammer bubble. They get stuck there because they can't afford Warhammer. Right. So what happens is they're like, this idea of like building models, painting them is really cool. I really like this idea. And then they look at the prices
in already.
Yeah, and they go,
more good
never
money
mind.
After that.
I can't afford that. And that's it. They write off the entire hobby because of the one game is really super expensive, right? There's a lot of people these days who I hear talking about the Bando Namkai kits, the Gundam little guys, the little robot man who they fight. You snip the colored plastic and they fight crime. Yes, exactly. You get a lot more people these days coming in through that because they're like, oh, cool, this is really neat, this is really awesome, this is cheap, this is affordable, and actually the kits are really innovative. They're really easy to build. And
see, I think Glendo was right here. The problem is about the death of the clubs and the clubs and the bigger community. Most people have got access to a Games Workshop store, maybe an independent hobby store, not likely to be all that local, and the clubs are dying everywhere, and that's where you saw everything being done.
There are upsides and downsides here. Like if it wasn't for the fact that there was a Games Workshop store local to me, I might not have I probably wouldn't be wargaming, right? Like they got me into the hobby for sure. They did, but it took me a really long time to discover that there was actually more to the hobby than just the single brand and franchise. It took me a really long time. And I think there's a lot of people who just don't care to like play other games. Like, have you ever tried to convince someone to try a game other than a Warhammer game? And it can be really hard.
Has anyone ever heard of the Guard Room? It's an old wargaming shop in Dunstable in Bedfordshire, and it was advertised in White Dwarf magazine for years, and it was there for decades. This shop, and the manager left, and I got the job, basically took over running this shop, and it was a tiny little like corner shop that sold like thousands and thousands of DBA, DBM armies, World War II stuff, literally everything from every historical era you can think of. Okay, and I worked there for a year and a half, and kids would come into the shop, walk past the Zulus, the colonial British, the World War II, the Afrika Korps, the Napoleonics, the Prussians, the Nazis, the Romans, everything, and go, all right, have you got any Spice Marines?
Yeah.
Because that's what we're interested in. And I'd go, maybe Space Marines are good, yes, but maybe you would like to try Jaegermech, you know.
Good luck with that. I'm gonna be real though. Like, in fairness to a lot of like wargaming, look, I love history, right? I love a history. I love it. But it is kind of boring when there are other, when you've got big burly men in power armor, right? And like the thing is, I feel like the market, like wargaming marketplace, is kind of starting to catch up to that. We're starting to see a lot more variety, or at least a lot more like there's definitely been a bit of a boom, I think, in like the last 10 years of games like Relic Blade and Frostgrave and like all the Joe McCullough games, and these games that are incorporating more fantastical elements into them, and they're also kind of accessible, playable experiences that, and a lot of them are indie. A lot of them are indie kind of darlings and indie experiences. I mean, if you look at like Pit Lord, for example, from the left, right? Demon Ship. These like micro games that you can put on a table and just play them with very few models. They're kind of like the antithesis of Warhammer, right? They're coming at it from like a different angle. And that's where I pin a lot of my like hopes for the future. But I'm not saying that like wargaming it has, I think that overall, I think wargaming would be bigger if Warhammer wasn't like, I don't know. I always go back and forth on this, whether or not Warhammer acts as a sort of lighthouse that kind of pulls people in, but then they go out and experience other games. You know, they go out and they try other games later on, and then they grow the hobby, or whether or not it's like people come into Warhammer, they get hit by that barrier of the price and they go, I'm not trying that. And then they never try other games. I don't know which way. I don't have any numbers to back it up, but I can just, it's both. It is both. And
I think it depends how, and the problem is how burnt out they get, because Warhammer is brutal.
Yeah, it spits you out.
Warhammer is you can play with your friend week after week with your 30, 40, 50 growing collection as a starter, and then you meet a new player who's a bit more stitched into the meta, been playing a little bit longer, and this collection that you've built lovingly over a period of time is just completely wiped off the table, and it is a brutal experience, and you realize that the next step in the gaming for you've achieved nothing so far, and it's really painful. And that's partly because it's such a long format game, that's partly because it's such an expensive game, and again, for a lot of people it's their only game that they maybe play once a month, if they're maybe twice a month. I do want to mention, Alex said there about Southland and Warlords. Yeah, that's a good example of the problem with the clubs, though. Southland and Warlords is a very large club in West Dulwich. It is the club that runs Salute. That's a pretty big club to be talking about. You know, not everyone it goes to the war has got the War Games Club near them that runs the biggest war game show in the country.
I'm really worried about game stores. Like, I'm really worried about the future of the hobby. That actually concerns me is the loss of high street game stores where you can actually go and play games, especially in the current context. Like, not a lot of people have the space for a big wargaming table anymore. And I think that in part is why we're seeing a lot more skirmish games and things like that, because like there's the demographic of people, like younger people, don't have like, you know, the space. They don't own their houses, they're renting, and they don't have like these big wargaming tables. And now there's a lot less gaming stores to actually meet people. Yeah, there's no clubs for
take their figures along and you know, use a few library books for hills or whatever, all that stuff. No, I think the thing for kids, it's a very different proposition. But I also think the scale of it is a problem. In terms of other companies, like Paul just mentioned there, in saying, you know, there's all of these other things, but each of them, there's a lot of other things. How do you choose within that? And then what you see time and time again, we get it on, like, you know, every time we put up a new review, someone's saying, oh, I really want to do this, but there's no one near me that wants to play that. You know, and the great advantage of Warhammer is that there are other players.
Yeah,
well, that's exactly what Discourse was saying, wasn't she? About how, you know, Warhammer can take away from the pool of other wargames, because last Christmas John bought me Hail Caesar, right? Yeah, and I watched Plebs, and I was like, I love Rome, and I was like,
Rome, yeah.
I built loads of Romans, and I also was really into the local Celtic tribe around here, the cat, whatever they're called, the Catavaluni, whatever.
Catavalani, yeah.
Those guys, and I was like, I'm going to do a big army of those. I'm going to do a big army of Caesarian Romans, and I'm going to play. No one around here plays House either. And
I'll play with you.
Yeah, okay. You bought it for me last year. I've painted it, John. Where are you? Where are you, man?
I'm right here. I'm right here.
John's painted about 20 Romans, I think, and a scorpion.
12, 15 at a push.
But it tracks into that. But you're right, guys. Like, it's easy to get a game of Warhammer, relatively, you know, compared to you know, other games. If you're lucky enough to be within a group of people, I mean, you guys are lucky. You've built like a really nice channel. You've met lots of people that do historical wargaming. You've introduced people in the wider hobby around you into it as well. And because your fingers on the pulse maybe a bit more, because you talk to people at Warlord and all those sorts of things, like you are prime real estate for historical wargaming. Bob down the road, who's played Warhammer for 15 years, and goes, I'm going to try 15 mil or 20 mil like World War II tanks. You know, he's going to know absolutely zero people, right? He's going to just have a stack of tanks in his corner of his room next to his Space Marines. I think. I don't know. I don't leave the house.
I think one of the reasons Bolt Action does very well in that respect, not just the content that it's 28 mil World War II, and it's got plastic figures. But you see this with Flames of War as well. But a lot of other games companies don't do it so well. Is it has really good starter sets.
Yeah,
It has a starter set that Band of Brothers starter set is pretty decent, and it does well because of the TV tie-in. That was one of the most successful historical dramas ever. Was the Band of Brothers thing? It made a fortune for HBO, but their later sets, their Island Assault one, and then their Gentleman's War, they've got even better. Their starter set content in terms of like your ability to play the game from this set and how close you are to being full. But a lot of other companies don't offer starter sets that are particularly attractively priced, well packaged, and provide a really strong entry point into the game. I think Warhammer does do that well. But I think other companies don't. You know, Warhammer's got like 4 starter sets.
The starter sets for Warhammer are actually really good. Like if you want to see like when Games Workshop are trying to offer value, it's those starter sets.
Yeah,
like some of those starter sets are excellent.
They're capable of doing it. Alex Draper put a really interesting comment in the chat here from Facebook, saying he's just bought Oathmark. Will be interesting to see how new old Warhammer rank and file game will affect Kings of War. I don't think it will affect Kings of War. Honestly, I don't think it will at all. I think Warhammer the Old World is pinpointed at a very small, hyper sort of like focused group of people.
Yeah.
With a nostalgia grab. But also, if we were talking about how the whole sort of canvas has changed and how a lot of wargaming now is driven by social media and personalities, there's almost like a celebrity Warhammer team out there, right? Now, Rob the Honest Wargamer is one of the good ones, I think. If you ever watch any of his videos, he's a very, very clever bloke, talks a lot of sense, and is pushing a narrative where it's like, you can 3D print armies for AOS, and he's showing people how you can do that for pennies, right? And people are doing it. People are rocking up to independent tournaments with 3D printed Lizard Man armies and having the best time ever in the game, right? I think the new set of rules for Warhammer the Old World, people will be using old armies they've got or 3D printing the myriad of amazing sculpts that are out there for a fraction of the cost. And I think Kings of War people are going to just keep playing Kings of War. Well, because it's great.
I think in fairness, though, like there is definitely a demographic overlap, I think, between the people who are playing Kings of War and the people who were fans of Warhammer Fantasy and will be into the old world. And I actually think that I'm kind of concerned about the direction of the old world, and I hope it's good. As always, I don't want things to be bad. I want things to be good, right? But I really feel like Games Workshop have missed a trick. Like the old world to me was a real opportunity to grab a massive audience of people who have never played a war game, but would have been really up for playing a war game. Namely, the Total War audience of people who literally have played Total War Warhammer and are like, oh my god, I love this setting. I love video gaming.
Can't believe. They didn't do it earlier in the release schedule. That's been on for nearly 10 years now. From
what I understand internally, the rumors that I've heard is that Warhammer the Old World is basically like a one-man project that's like a pet project of a single person at Games Workshop who really pushed for it to be the case. And it's kind of like an indulgence by the company. And you can kind of see that, it does kind of maybe seem to be the case. But that's just a rumor that I've heard. But in terms of the game itself, it seems very squarely aimed at the kind of market of people who played Warhammer Fantasy back in the day, and it's trying to grab them. My worry is there wasn't enough people playing Warhammer Fantasy back in the day to retain Warhammer Fantasy back in the day, right? Like they did end it. And so I'm kind of concerned that Warhammer the Old World is going to be, it's going to launch. It's going to sell, its starter box is going to sell really well. It's going to sell out because everyone's like, oh yeah, they get all hyped and everyone's excited for it. And they're like, I'm going to start a new army. And then they'll buy the box, they'll get all the sprues, and then it'll go in the cupboard and kind of never be seen ever again. Basically, how Horus Heresy went. Everyone bought into the game, and then how many people are still playing Horus Heresy? Like no one in my local scene anyway. So I'm worried because I want Warhammer the Old World to do well. Like I think it's a really cool setting. I really love it. It's like one of my favorite settings, and I just like I'm worried because I feel like there was an opportunity to make a new, more innovative, more accessible, faster paced war game in the Old World, and that actually would have appealed to a larger demographic of people who exist. I think that people who play Total War would be 100% up for wargaming, but yeah, I just think it was a bit of a missed trick. Still hope it's good.
Crypto Kev said something about it's like going back to an abusive ex.
Yeah. Where was it? I did put it up there.
Yeah, but something else people aren't. They're talking about a little bit, but I think it's going to be one of the biggest stumbling points for the old world. It won't affect new players, but we already know. They've not gone for that fresh blood. They've not gone for the Total War people. They've gone for the old people. Now, bear with me. If you've been following this family drama of Warhammer dying and then Age of Sigmar, you would have had a big Warhammer army, which you would have then had to destroy.
Oh, you had to burn it. You have to burn it. Yeah.
Right? No, you had to clip all the bases of goblins, right? 100 goblins, you clip the square bases off, you lose half their toes, right? And you glue them on round bases, and then they say, we're doing the old world, and guess what? Square is back. But it's not old square, it's new square, slightly bigger square. So you're like, I have to rebase my army again to play a game that you told me I couldn't play.
Most of those models on 20mm bases did need to be on bigger square bases.
Agreed.
There's a whole ranks of sideways men was a bit naff. They needed to be put on bigger bases.
I don't envy Games Workshop's position there because I think that is really tough. Like, I think on the one hand, it kind of sucks if you're somebody who has an old army and like you kind of have to rebase. But on the other hand, like those bases were too small, like for sure. Like they really were. I had an old Empire army filled with spearmen and halberds, and boy, like they trying to get those guys to rank up and line up in line without falling over was just an absolute nightmare.
Do you still have that army?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've still got.
Would you like a game of Warhammer at some point?
Sure, if you can swim very well.
I am a good swimmer.
Oh well. You can get across the channel by all means.
The channel, presumably you mean the Irish Sea.
The Irish Sea,
yes.
Yeah, same thing.
Just grab a ferry.
It's quite a bit further than the channel.
The Irish channel.
Yeah, the Irish channel.
Yeah.
I'm often in Wales.
Well, there you go.
Anyway,
so you're almost there. Almost there.
I need
You
to
gotta go, John.
poop. Yeah.
Oh, you went there. You didn't. It was a joke, John. You didn't have to do it.
You're meant to pull a face as well.
I genuinely do. So, Discourse, it's been beautiful to see you again.
You're going to show us what you painted before you go, John?
Briefly, yeah. I've wrapped up your first Warhound. Lighting's terrible, but it's the Legio Mortis, red and black.
Very nice.
So yeah, one down. Took a little longer than I was expecting, but that's not so bad. It wasn't that bad. Wasn't so bad. But yes, viewers, thank you. You've been all very busy having a chit chat. There's been some hilarious comments.
Lovely.
So thank you for joining in. And I'll see you all next time. For now.
All right.
Bye bye.
See you, John.
Bye, John.
Good night, guys.
We will wrap up, I think. Although I know John has to go because his phone starts to melt after a while that he's on.
Has he looked into a PC or like a webcam?
So Paul, what about you? What have you painted so far?
I'll show you on my camera. Hang on, I will show you if it's still in focus. I painted up this cute little dungeon. Well, I started painting up this cute little dungeon master. Let's go. There he is.
Oh, from the TV show.
Yeah, he's not quite. I've just base coated him basically, but he's getting there. He's nearly there. Oh, it's all mirrored and wrong. But there we go. There's the Dungeon Master from the TV show.
There we go.
He looks great.
It does look great.
Such clean lines. How'd you get the white looking so good?
Pro Acryl by Monument Hobbies. Buy some; it will save your life.
That was very strong from you there, Paul. Like,
No, it's
it's
literally the best paint range that's out there at the moment. It's not a huge range, but they're super pigmented. They go on smooth, and they brilliant.
Right. I think it's a higher pigment content.
Yeah, just really nice medium, really high pigment content. And you also get a lot more. You get 22 mil instead of 18. So.
And which company was that for anyone?
Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl. You can get it if you're in the UK. Element Games. If you're in America, go to Monument Hobbies. They have deals, and they come in really cool bottles that don't leak. They've got little twisty lids.
Yeah,
they're fantastic. Really great paints.
Magic. So what have you got coming up then, Discourse? Is there anything that people can look forward to if they pop over to? Is it Discourse Minis, the name of your channel?
Discourse Minis for the wargaming, and Dungeons and Discourse for the RPG content. For the Discourse Minis, I'll have a video out this week, basically talking about the kind of stock price movement of Games Workshop. There's been some classic cries of "it's the end of Games Workshop," and once again, I have to do a video that says no, it's not. But everyone will say that I'm saying that it is. Because for some reason people think that I can't scroll out in the stock price graph. Also, on the Dungeons and Discourse side of things, I was going to be doing a video talking about new editions of Dungeons and Dragons, but I guess now I'm talking about all the layoffs. So that's fun. So a really fun week for me, basically. Kaiser, awesome. Mm-hmm. I will be playing lots of games though. I just got done with a review of Blood and Plunder, actually, on my Patreon. Mm-hmm. I review other war games on my Patreon because obviously it's part of the war game hobby. So I reviewed Blood and Plunder there, and it's good. It's okay. It's got a 7 out of 10. It's fun.
7 out of 10.
Yeah,
we don't normally give numbers on ours. I have wondered about whether we should formulate our reviews. Presentation, rules, model count, value for money.
I just do three potatoes for rules.
Yeah, I just give out arbitrary numbers because people like numbers, so I just give them out arbitrary numbers. Blood and Plunder was fun though. I really enjoyed. You've played Blood and Plunder, right?
No, we played Men of War. It's not Men of War. Is it Men of War? They're
Blood and Valor.
No.
Oh, no. Men of War.
Man of War.
Yeah.
No, that's the name of the Warhammer game.
You've done an unboxing on the channel. I know that much. You unboxed the big starter set that comes.
And I remember calling it Man of War on that as well. It's not called Man of War.
Yes, Crypto Kev on Twitch.
Blood and Plunder was a ton of fun. Pirates versus British Navy. I mean, what's not the love about that? I do like history, by the way. Whenever I said history was lame earlier, I mean for the kids, for the youth, for the Gen Alphas and all that. Kids. Yeah, I like history. I thought Blood and Plunder was fun
as well. Whether it's about cultural changes, right? So, Star Wars, you can kill an infinite number of robots, but you can't kill many people if you want to have the ratings, suitable for kids. Mm-hmm. Is part of kids and the hobby in Games Workshop. Mum and Dad are quite happy with you playing battle games with fantasy things. They're not happy with you having a collection of Nazi tanks in the way that my generation's parents were, and we were reared on Sunday afternoons by killing Nazis on TV. That's what it was all about. And for you, the voice over was, the capture scene in every single Sunday afternoon movie. I think people's modern sensibilities are a lot less comfortable around that.
I don't think it's about that. I think it's just about the fact that there isn't as many things about killing Nazis on the TV, right? It's mostly about Marvel and kind of superhero stuff and fantasy thing. Like Lord of the Rings was massive, and now you've got you had Game of Thrones for a while there, and just fantasy. It's all more accessible now. It's more mainstream, right? A lot of these kind of nerd interests are more mainstream, and therefore it just makes it more kind of like acceptable, right? And it makes it more, people get more interested in it. There's more interest in those things because people get exposed to them and they discover that, yeah, actually that'd be kind of cool. Which is why I actually think that Firelock Games, the creators of Blood and Plunder, are kind of missing a trick at the minute, because it's a beautiful like books and very historical, like basically there was a pirate historian who actually
is why it is the way it is.
Yeah, so authentic. It just feels great, and it's a lot of fun for that reason. But I feel like there could be a pirate fantasy game in there that maybe like, where's my mermaids? Where's my skeletons and buried treasure?
I don't think you'll ever get that from them, because they're so focused on the fact that it's.
I heard.
Did you?
I heard from a little birdie that apparently they are working perhaps on an expansion for Blood and Plunder that involves more super Kraken or something like that. So I think that would be really cool. I'd love to see that. I will say,
what's
though,
important to remember is that 17th century sailors believed in Kraken.
Yeah, they were real.
To
those sailors. Yeah, to those sailors.
They were real.
I think like a mythic version of the game would be really fun to play. I really love it, because I think the core system is really good. I think that the game is a D10 system where you get like reload markers, when you fire your gun, because it's like old matchlock guns. So you have like reload markers. You got to like reload your guns. They're quite slow. So you're having to fight really. And you get fatigue when you lose guys. It's kind of similar to the bolt action pinning system, but you get a resilience check against the pins, and they can be a bit more impactful. And there's a whole mini game about activations where each player's playing a card and you're trying to like be faster than your opponent in terms of
it's something that Warhammer seem. I mean, they've dabbled with it with their stratagems, but when I look at modern games that I've really enjoyed recently, is they've imported stuff from board games and cards that have effects during the turn. Really make a game fresh, because what they do is what I think that war games often really struggle to do, especially the ones that are more sim heavy, is they provide player agency. If I have a hand of cards that have special effects on them, and it's going to boost the firing, boost the movement, improve the morale check, make a tighter turn, whatever it is, I get to choose where I use that to change how the turn is going to play out. And so many war games is I dump my models on my side of the table and they plop towards the objective, rolling dice, and target choice is the only real decision that I'm making. Yeah. Whereas giving you a hand of cards really changes the player's engagement and choice.
I agree. And I mean, to be honest, I think that that kind of fast-paced, engaging gameplay is something that just really speaks to me with a lot of work. It's why I love bolt action so much. Now, bolt action is different in the sense that most of the time your decision is target allocation, but at the very least, they make that an engaging experience because pins matter, and who you're going to activate first, and you're drawing dice from a bag, so you never know who's going to go next. You're constantly thinking about the activation. I think that's a ton of fun. But if you like, do you play a lot of the AMG games? Because they have
AMG
on a lot. So Atomic Mass Games. They do Shatterpoint. They're now the custodians of like Star Wars Legion, because they have taken on a lot of board game concepts and have incorporated them into wargaming. Like Star Wars Legion. Have you played Star Wars Legion?
No, I haven't. It was just another. It was another premium. Well, it's a premium price game that I didn't feel I had time or want to put money into. Is really the thing. I'm not saying I wouldn't play it.
I didn't get on.
You didn't like it?
No, I got it. I love Star Wars, and I bought it, painted all the figures up. I played it with John. Every Christmas, me and John got together and we play a bunch of games. We did Gore Chosen last year, Warhammer Quest, I think, and then we played a bit of Legion. And I was just like, this is the most complicated thing ever. Why are there different dice for different things with triangles?
Yeah. There's a lot of proprietary dice and proprietary like measuring systems and things like that. But again, that's actually, I think that's coming from there, because it was originally designed by Fantasy Flight Games, who create board games and card games. And so they come into the war game market and they are bringing a lot of the sensibilities that they had in board gaming into wargaming. So, there has to be a proprietary measuring stick. It has to be something that's included in the starter set, and they have to bring their own dice and things, which are all kind of pretty relatively normalized, I think, in board games. But there's a lot activation cards in that game for example, is like a massive element. And like your different generals have different activation cards and they do different things depending on how you activate. And then there's this kind of randomized activation on the top of that. So I think you would actually quite like Kaiser. I think you would quite like.
Oh, I suspect I would, because I actually think, and it won't happen. I'm pretty confident of that. Well, because when we had Alessio on last time, someone talked about cards and things. He's really not into that, and more importantly, I don't think John Stallard is either. And if the client doesn't want it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think when you talk about the success about bolt action, I think that there's a few key things that I think is every future game designer should be looking at. Why bolt action is the next game, and certainly the historical game is at the top, because it's really lightweight for a historical game. Is it's very small. People forget how small a games bolt action is recommended to played. It's 3 units of infantry, 2 guns, a machine gun, a mortar, an armored car, and a tank. It's 8 to 12 units, but that's really, if you're stretching it, more near the 8 mark. It's a game that takes an hour and a half, and it's got a high level of player engagement because it's got a tight time frame. So you've got to do the mission within 6 turns, which means you've got to bloody move. If you want to attack, I've got to cover 36 inches in 6 turns, and I move 6 inches on foot. I've got to get going now. And I think board games are very good at doing that. It's like giving you a really tight kind of frame. You have to operate in this space that forces interaction, and then they're completely open. Move any unit you like whenever you want to do it.
The pacing for bolt action is one of its greatest feats, I think. Like when you pull a die from the bag, you activate your unit, and then what do? You just pull another die from the bag, and you just keep going. It's just so quick to go, and you're always engaged because it could be you next at any moment. It could be you who's going next.
There's no, which is really bad in a lot of games. If I take a whole turn or a good chunk of my turn, there's nothing. There's no. The defensive player just sits and has it done to him. You don't make your own saving throws or anything like that. There's a couple of reactions in the game. Do I go down with my infantry? Or do I make a recon move with my armored car? But basically, the player taking the turn is in control of the action. And what that means is it's quite quick. He doesn't have to wait for the other guy to react in any way. And I should stop referring to all players as men, because there are some women. That's a bad habit on my part. So I think there's a lot about Games Workshop that's not about the mechanics of the actual firing and fighting. It's the other stuff. I think Games Workshop's games would be better if they made them smaller and directed you to play them on a smaller scale because of the complexity of the game. I think if I played Ejectus Titanicus with 10 mechs, I would have hated it. But because we played it with 3, I enjoyed it.
My favorite size of a Warhammer 40k game is 1,000 points. That's what I like to play. I like to play at 1,000 points. I don't like to 2,000 points. It takes too long, and it's already quite a slow game, So it 2,000 is too.
I remember in the glory days of 8th edition, we were playing like 25, 30 power games. It was like the perfect kind of balance, wasn't it? It was like 40. It's like 40k in 40 minutes.
I had a lot of hope for Combat Patrol. I was really hoping the Combat Patrol game mode would be like a bigger pillar of 10th edition, and that they would give it more support. I thought that's
so horrifically unbalanced.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's the problem. Willie Mike, who's a regular on our show, he went to a local store with his Dark Angels box set painted up to play Combat Patrol. And his first game, they played on the Kill Team board, so they're tiny. The other guy he played against had the Khorne Demons one, and he had no models left in turn 2.
Yeah.
The Space Marine player. They're so horrifically unbalanced forces.
It's not fun, is it?
No, and if that's your experience of one, that's the problem about Warhammer sort of chewing you up and spitting you out. You got that for Christmas or your birthday. Then you started playing your mate, and he had Eldar, which wasn't a great box either. So you were kind of okay. And then this happens to you, and you realize that that's what's next. That again and again.
the number of people I know who were almost put off the entirety of Wargaming because they played one game of Warhammer and then they just in the first turn their models just got evaporated after having spent all this money and time building the models and then boom, I don't know. I think we've talked already on the podcast before about you go, I go and the problems with like the activation system and stuff. But the combat patrol, I was kind of hoping that the combat patrols themselves would be more balanced because they were willing to amend the stats of things and add special rules and remove them. And I was hoping that they would be robustly play tested and they would have been balanced. And
they've just not gone far enough.
No, well, I don't think that they. I'm gonna be honest, Kaiser.
They put enough time into it.
No, I don't think they play test these games. I'm gonna be real. Like I don't, or at least not like robustly. Like not with like.
You're right.
Yeah.
And if you want to know how much faith Warhammer themselves have in combat patrol, the Warhammer World Kids Tournament, which we were invited to take a group of kids up to, which would be tomorrow, in fact, if we'd been able to go, they are using 500-point armies, and it's not combat patrol.
Wow,
it's just 500-point armies.
Yeah,
it's like this is an official Warhammer Alliance tournament for schools, and they're not using their alleged format for this size.
Warhammer 40,000 has been balanced on 3 occasions and 3 occasions only. When second edition was released, and you had Codex Imperialis, which was the little black and white photocopied like army book, get you through army book in second edition box set. Everything in there was play tested for the release of that box set, so everything in there worked. Third edition, they did a similar thing. They had a get you through army list in the back of the main rule book, and 8th edition when they released all the indexes. See, only 3 times.
Almost balanced.
3 times.
Yeah. It had its flaws, but nothing like what came after.
It was as balanced as it could ever be on those 3 occasions.
I was hopeful for 10th edition. I was really hoping that it would be.
Too.
The game is so from what I understand, the game is actually at an okay place right now, from what I've heard. After like the first 3 months just being Eldar City, welcome to the Pain Dome. Apart from that, it feels like they've kind of gotten things a little bit under control. But the problem with that is that it's kind of too late because most of the people in my area that are playing Warhammer are like, they're like not really having fun. So. Not going to play it anymore. And now I'm kind of like, well, maybe I can convince them to play some one-page rules, maybe, because I do have a lot of Warhammer models that I do like to kind of get use out of. But
I mean, the success of one-page rules is just testament to how many people have gone out of Warhammer. It is a straight rip-off in terms of the armies. That's like this is this. It was conceived of unit for unit, right? It's all in there.
It was conceived of as a playable version of Warhammer, right? Like that. That was the point of one-page rules. I do think it's kind of cool. They've opened up. They have a sort of community army builder now. So basically, they farmed out the construction of new, more unique factions to the community, which is kind of neat. I kind of like it, right? Because it's a robust kind of army builder system where you'll get the points allocated to your units automatically. So you can kind of, in theory, build a relatively balanced force. So that's kind of cool. I do like that. I think that is really interesting. That's really neat. But yeah,
I like one-page rules.
Me too.
That's what I wanted Warhammer to be. Although I find a lot of my friends who play Warhammer don't like it so much because it's too simple. It's like, that's why I like it.
There are things that Warhammer does well. Like Warhammer gets a lot of criticism from wargamers, I think, because obviously it has a lot of problems, right? But I think that Warhammer definitely has things that it does better than anybody else. I think its list building, for example, is brilliant. I think that it's a lot of fun. Or well, maybe 10th edition, not so much, but at least in 9th edition, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, if you're someone who enjoys building big lists and like really thinking and considering about all your different options, I think Warhammer is a really good game for that. I think it does that really, really well. I think it's excellent. I think one of the issues is that there's often like a right answer rather than a wrong answer, but that is an upside of Warhammer. Like it is something that Warhammer does well. It's list building. I prefer, like I find list building in Warhammer more engaging than when I'm building a list in bolt action, right? With bolt action, I'm just like, I'm going to take all my units that I have. With Warhammer, each unit has a lot of choices. Although actually, now that I think about it, Conflict 47 is pretty fun to build lists for, because you can give like Panzerschreck to your little German guys. You can give like, you can increase your Waffen up to veterans and things. Okay, actually, never mind. Warhammer isn't as good as bolt action list building, but it's better than a lot of other games.
You just made Warhammer sound like Championship Manager compared to like FIFA of like football games.
Yeah. But I actually think that its list building, like how robust its list building is part of its success. It's because like most people don't actually, like we were talking about earlier, most people don't
you can
play
do that at home without the models.
You can be by yourself. You can be sitting in the house, on a Thursday night, Tuesday night, tonight, and just be like, I'm going to build an army list, and I'm going to imagine what it will be like and how it will perform on the table, and like, white room it, and imagine like the scenarios where it's good and it performs well, right? And that's why the competitive scene is so big in Warhammer, because it really builds for that.
The last list I wrote was a troll army for AOS, and I've still not played a single game of AOS.
Yeah,
right.
Age of Sigmar, the little game that could not.
So we should probably wrap up. We're half an hour running. I say running over. I mean, when there's things to talk about, if people are staying, then we'll stay. So over the next few weeks, the new bobblehead teams are out for the Star Trek game. So I'm very pleased because I'm going to have the Doras sisters here. The miniatures are weird because they've got massive heads.
They're beautiful.
Wait, are they bobblehead like miniatures?
Chibis.
They're chibis. Well, they're not short though.
Yeah.
The rest of their body is kind of in proportion, and then they've got massive heads.
Is it basically like the war game equivalent of whenever you would put on big head mode in a video game back in like the 2000s?
When that was in the graphics option, giant head mode. Yeah, but we also got sent their organized play set, which comes with 10 Q miniatures. So I think we might do a bit of a giveaway with some of those. The people want John Delancey miniature in their collection, but didn't necessarily want to buy the Star Trek game. It was a surprisingly good game. I definitely would say that. We are working on our Christmas quiz, which I think we have booked in for the 21st. Watch out for we'll post it up on Facebook and the other places to let you know when it's coming. And we do take viewer submissions of questions. So for those of you, we try and keep it within the kind of genres that we do. So there's no quizzes about Taylor Swift or anything like that, but history, war games, Warhammer, science fiction movies, those kind of things. And it is a lot of fun if you want to feel like a total idiot one evening. Then come along and enjoy our quiz. We will still publish videos over the Christmas because we will record them in advance. But this will be the last live show, apart from the quiz, before the new year. But don't worry, we'll be back in much the same way. So, Paul, remind the people at home where they can find you if they want to watch you paint miniatures on
So
Twitch.
if you want to come watch me paint on Twitch, I do that every Tuesday morning and every Friday morning, and sometimes on Fridays we play Hero Quest, the old school Hero Quest live.
Oh.
It's chill, it's a small community, it's not your average Twitch channel. I don't beg for subs, just come and hang out. Nice Discord, it's pretty cool. Thanks.
All right. And Discourse, your channels again one last time.
Please sub to me, please. I'm begging you. No, I've got 2 YouTube channels: Discourse Minis for Wargaming, Dungeons and Discourse for RPG content. Both of them covering kind of news, gaming stuff, topics, anything I find interesting. Come hang out if you like spicy, apparently hot takes that are very controversial. I don't think they should be. Thanks, I guess. Thanks for having me on the show, Kaiser. I've had a lot of fun. I've had a real blast.
It's always good to have you on. I passionately believe there should be more debate in our hobby instead of just kind of fanboy stuff, which is good. It's always good.
Did you guys see the new miniatures that came out? Oh boy!
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.
Bye bye.